Hi, today we're going to talk about two very important functions, find and getComponent. How are they used? Well, for instance, avatar, that is a GameObject distinct from ground, wants to access a piece of data that is inside the component inside ground. So again, we have a component on avatar called find and getComponent, and it wants to read convex, that is a boolean, so it can be false like now or true when you check it. So it wants to read this, but it is on a different GameObject called ground, on a component that is of different type. It's not even called of type find and getComponent, is of type mesh collider, right? Well, we can do that. So find is what this component calls to find ground. So let me show you how it works. We have this public GameObject ground geo. Geo, of course, stands for GameObject. And in start, we say equal find ground. So we already had another class, another lesson where we said the start is the best place to get references to other components and other GameObjects. So that's why we are using start and not awake. So after we execute this line, because when it looks for another GameObject in the hierarchy called ground, it finds it, is here. Right? There you go. Notice that the capital G, so it has to be spelled exactly identical. But it finds it, and so it returns something that is not null. So initially this ground geo is null, and now after executing this, it contains a reference to the GameObject called ground in the hierarchy. And now through this reference, we call getComponent mesh collider. So again, now we are ground geo sets us here. So we can say ground geo.getComponent mesh collider, and if one of the components on the ground GameObject is of type mesh collider, then it will get a reference to it. And in fact, because there is, it will find it. So we'll get a reference to this overall component. And then we could access any of these things that are exposed, but we choose to just read convex, okay? So that's exactly what happens now. Through the GameObject reference, we call getComponent mesh collider. Because there is a mesh collider component on the ground, this now will no longer be null. And this is start is over. Then in update, it says ground GeoObjects mesh colliders convex is mesh collider.convex. So it reads this field. That is exactly the one we wanted. It could also write it, right? But in this case, we only choose to read it. So now, because it's unchecked, we expect that update prints false, that it is false. Again, this is code that is running inside the avatar's find and getComponent component. But because it reaches inside grounds and in particular the mesh collider component of it, it reads convex. And in fact, it says it is false, right? Now, we can click it, we can check it, and it becomes true. So, effectively, code that runs inside the avatar is reading something that is public, of course, so it's exposed. It's okay to do it. It reads a field that is public inside the component that is in another completely different GameObject. So if I uncheck it now, it goes back to false. So this is how in Unity, different GameObjects reads each other's different data on different components, and that's one way to exchange information. Notice that now I press stop, basically I don't play anymore. You can see that here the reference to the ground GameObject and to the mesh collider component are null. Start is executed immediately after I press play, and they are populated. Notice when I click on ground, it highlights in the hierarchy, highlights this. See, I click it again. See? So it really is a reference to that ground. And then from there, it gets a reference to the component, this one. And then through the reference to the component, it reads convex. All right, I hope this was clear, and hopefully it's not too difficult, because we'll use it a lot, right? And we'll have also ways to do things easier than that. So this is kind of an extreme situation where you have to reach a data inside a different component that is inside a different game object. Oftentimes there are shortcuts to these things, and we'll look at them now. But for now, it's good to know what the general rule that always works is, and then we also learn the shortcuts later. Thank you.